Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
You must be hyper smelling your black coffee.
Just smelling it is enough to...
That's all it takes for me.
Oh, that caffeine smells good. All right. Hey. Welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast. I'm Wilson, Austin Wilson, here with Rob, Josh Robb. In light of this being our 7th episode, we're going to call it episode 007. So buckle up your proverbial seatbelts, or actual if you're driving, please buckle up. Not wearing a seatbelt is terribly irresponsible. And think with me for a second. What would James Bond drive today in 2020, or maybe beyond? Would he even have to drive at all with all the technology at his fingertips from the mighty Q? So imagine a modern-day 2020 James Bond sipping on a martini, shaken, not stirred of course, in the backseat of an autonomous Aston Martin, being chased by the bad guys. I don't know the open container rules in the areas where the super spy operates, so take this story with a grain of salt, and always abide by your local traffic laws. Well, we might not be so far from this becoming a reality. So today's episode is about autonomous vehicles.
Autonomous. Does that mean you stick with one vehicle for the rest of your life?
Yeah, no, Josh, that is monogamy.
Okay. So that just means you know all the car parts?
No, Josh, again, that is anatomy.
Okay, so autonomous, huh? That would be, you know what? I saw a good article on Wikipedia. We'll link to that below.
Man,
that really describes it, yeah. And so there's also some good articles coming out because it is a newer technology.
Yeah.
And but there are 5 levels to autonomous vehicles, right? So autonomous vehicles are vehicles that have technology to reduce the amount of things the driver has to do. And so level 0, so there's 5 levels. Level 0 is a car with no driver assistance.
So there's really 6 if you include level 0.
Yeah. 0 is just none, no autonomy.
So James Bond would say about level 0, well, I like to do some things the old-fashioned way.
That's true. And that would be like my Jeep Wrangler. There's no help.
It doesn't even
whatsoever.
shift for you.
It does not. I have to do that myself.
Like a horse and buggy.
Yep. So level 1, though, is the first level autonomous vehicles, and that's where they have not cruise control, but adaptive cruise control, and also some sort of lane assistance. And so think of a normal cruise control or the old cruise control. You set it, it stays at that speed. No matter what, you'll go that speed no matter what's in front of you.
The one where you can rear end the car in front of you if you keep the same speed.
So an adaptive cruise control, which is this first level, what they've really kind of started this kind of ball rolling for autonomous vehicles, is the idea that, hey, you could set your pace, but the car knows what's in front of it, and if it gets closer to the vehicle in front of it, it will adjust or adapt the speed to keep you that safe distance.
So it's kind of like sonar.
Yes.
Like a bat.
Yes, that's what they do use, that type of idea of the constant checking of where are the things around me. And the same is true with the lane assist. If you try to change lanes on like a 4-lane highway and there's someone beside you in your blind spot, the car itself can prevent you from doing that if you have this lane assist.
Yeah, and I think this level technically would even also have some measurement system where it looks at the lines on the road on a highway too, where
keep you from drifting.
Yeah, it keeps you from drifting. So you get a little sleepy on the road after a big lunch or something like that. Then it'll kind of, if you start going over a line and don't plan on it, it'll kind of help you back.
Yep. And so that's kind of the starting. So that's level 1. And then as you go up level 2, you get a little more. And so that's where you can have some sort of driving assist, but you need to have your hands either on the wheel or right there at the wheel. You got to be ready to take over because it can't do everything. The driver assist it can, in a sense, keep you in the lane, help you merge and move, but it doesn't have the full autonomy that you're looking for. So level 2, it helps you adjust the speed and the steering, but you got to be ready to grab it at any kind of change. So let's say there's a guy on a bike beside you or something. The car doesn't know what to do yet. It doesn't know how that guy's going to swerve or move lanes. It's not there. Then you go to level 3. That's where the vehicle is capable of driving themselves. So under ideal conditions, it's it. You just set it, you let it go. All right. So you're there, you're still in the front seat, you still got your steering wheel, but it's doing it.
But it's not everywhere, right?
No. So level 3, you're really limited to divided highways, limited access, meaning you can only get on and off on the ramps.
Right, like an interstate.
Yes. And so that gives you the ability that there's not as much input that it has to worry about. That's the big deal there. So then you move up to level 4. That's where they can drive themselves without human interaction. So pretty much you get in the car, you say, or you type, or however you put it in, hey, this is where I want to go. Here's the address. You let it go. All right. So you're still inputting where it's going. You're sitting there, but it's doing it.
And there's still some restrictions on where that would be available probably with level 4, right?
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's more. So level 3 is on the highways. Level 4 is you take that same and move it to probably a little bit more main roads. But in town and with traffic, you probably have to pay attention. Then level 5 is fully autonomous. You may not even have a steering wheel and pedals at this point. You get in a car, you tell it where it needs to go, and you sit back, eat your donut, and let it drive. And so that's the point where that's the end goal is they're no longer, in a sense, cars that we think of with steering wheels and pedals. The seats may not all even face forward at that point.
It's more of a chauffeur.
Yeah. And so that's the goal, is to get to the point where the vehicle has enough information and technology to know what to do in all situations.
So when it gets the ability to save us our 3 and 5 minute commutes to work,
that's right.
We just don't even have to think about it. Just get in the car.
Yep.
That's level 5
for 3 minutes.
So yeah, I kind of think we're probably at around level 2.5.
Yeah.
I would say that legally speaking, we're probably at level 2. So Tesla and autopilot, we'll talk about that here more in a little bit more depth soon. But Tesla and their autopilot system is probably a level 2 that they say explicitly, hey, keep alert and be ready to take over at any moment. But I think that people take advantage of this and treat it more like a level 3 system where they really don't do anything. There's reports of people sleeping or reading or whatever on the highway in these Tesla autopilot vehicles. So yeah, I would say we're probably around a 2.5. And, this is a progressive scale. So we're only going to get more and more automated with where the technology is and how available it is over time. So Josh, who are the major players in autonomous vehicles in general?
So right now, you kind of mentioned Tesla is kind of the one that goes to first in mind for a lot of people. Is when you talk about self-driving cars, they are the first movers. They're the first ones to really bring out to market something with that capability,
a mass market.
Yes, and so they have their their Tesla models that they're described as kind of that. Hey, at some point you're going to not have to worry about driving this thing. Right now, it's like you said, it's kind of at that 2 to 3 range. But they also are known because they push these things out before there's really any regulations on it either. So they were the first out there, and they kind of have that ask for forgiveness rather than permission attitude, where they pushed it out and said, hey, we're going to use the U.S. population as a guinea pig to see how this works. Mm-hmm. And there's been some results from that have been tragic, but there's also been a lot learned for the positive as well.
Right.
So Tesla's the first one that comes to mind. Google has their own division, Waymo, and that's one of their offshoots of the main, Google, you think about their search engine.
Yeah, it's called their Other Bets segment,
their Other
right?
Bets. They split those out a while back and really are showcasing kind of what they're trying to do, and this is one of the big ones. They're putting a lot of money
for sure
into
They're
this,
losing a lot of money
into this idea, but they have a lot of advantage there though, because you think of Google's Maps. So when it does come to level 4 and 5, when the cars are driving themselves, they're going to need to navigate. And so those things that they've already been kind of driving ahead are already available for them, whereas Tesla are going to need to rely on maps from somebody else to get there. And then GM has one, their Cruise division, which isn't actually just GM. There's a lot of other auto companies that are actually participating in GM's research, kind of as an auto industry.
Right.
Honda, I think, is one of the ones there.
Yep.
And they're all kind of putting their chips in together, saying we as a group may be able to come up with this type of
It's not a
technology.
cheap process by any means. There's a lot of research and development costs, and I think GM is trying to leverage their size. They're a big auto company, but with some other companies' scale and cash too, to kind of jump into the game a little bit bigger than they would by themselves.
Yep. And then last is Uber, and so they were trying to do it on their own, and they're still looking. They may have to do a merger or something to really become a bigger player, but their concept being, hey, our job is to get people one spot to another that doesn't have a car, doesn't have access to a car. If we don't have a driver, that would be great. Maybe we have a car that just gets you one way or another, and you don't have to worry about the awkward conversation with that driver along the way.
I have my own thoughts on that we'll talk about soon. I'm pretty excited. So yeah, specifically speaking about Tesla's autopilot, there was a really, really well-written case study in Bloomberg Businessweek on October 14th of 2019, and the title was Tesla's Autopilot Could Save Millions of Lives. How many people will it kill first? I thought that was a really catchy really catchy title, but the article was really great and a lot of good data in there. But some key points that I think are worth talking about is that Tesla itself is really aiming to dominate the global auto market by building the world's first self-driving car, and autopilot isn't there yet, but it is the crucial first step that they need to take to be there and to be that first completely automated car. So autopilot has logged more than 1.5 billion with a B, not million, billion miles, 1.5 billion miles. And while the manual states that drivers need to pay attention, so while they would say that it's a level 2, that's not always been the case, and many users trust the technology and even sleep or read while driving. So it's a little bit more the level 3 where they probably Tesla itself wouldn't really say it's quite that safe yet, but they're working on it. So the artificial technology is really all about machine learning. So it's actually killed 4 or 5 people over this time, but the more data that the systems collect, the better the technology can get. So the technology just self-learns. So the more data that's in there, the more the cars have seen, the more the cars have reacted, or that they've just learned on being on the road for billions of miles now, and it makes it better and better all the time.
So when you talk about that, it's, they're learning from the experiences.
Right.
And that part of that is not only how they react, but how the driver reacts as well, right? So going back to my bicyclist, so if there's a bicyclist on the side of the road, it could do a lot of things. Now, us as humans, we've seen people on bikes before. So if we see them leaning or there's a car in front of them, we know they tend to swerve out when they're going around a car. We know what we're doing. The car doesn't until it sees it multiple times and learns, okay, a bike in front of me on the right, if another car is approaching it, it tends to swerve in front of me. I need to slow down and give it space. That's the learning that it does is over experiences.
And that's actually one of the key weaknesses in the software currently is that there's no official recognition yet of motorcycles and bicycles, where they're so small and they do things so differently than a car that they have not yet learned enough to make those informed decisions, the cars themselves. So it requires more of a human oversight, and that's probably one of the bigger pitfalls of the technology as of now. And me as a motorcycle rider, it scares me to death, because I'm like, if I'm riding along the highway and Tesla's cruising down the road and doesn't see me and swerves, that's not good.
Yeah.
So
or sees you and reacts differently.
The wrong way.
Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully over time that will get better. But, through this machine learning and this artificial intelligence, new updates are constantly being rolled out. The owners really say every couple of weeks there's a big update, and that every single update, the software makes the car seem and react more human-like. Mm-hmm. So I think we're headed the right direction, and I'm hoping personally that I hear some good news on the motorcycle bicyclist side of things in the future, because I think that might be a hang-up, not necessarily for people who, obviously people who ride motorcycles and bicycles, but people who own the cars don't want to buy a car that would do something unsafe.
And when you talk about acting more human-like, we're trying to get away from acting human-like, but you want human at least understanding, and that's kind of where it's getting to. It has a faster reaction time, but you want it to react the same way human would, but just quicker.
Right.
And when it comes to
more consistent.
Yeah. And when it comes to the human piece of that, early on when they first rolled this out, it was a lot of jittering, starting and stop, because the computer was just very confused with it. There's a lot of data being pushed through it. But it's over time, okay, a parked car is not scary from the computer standpoint because it's not moving anywhere and I can ignore it. But when it kept seeing cars early on, it kept thinking, brake, it could turn. Well, there's nobody in it to make it turn, so it has to acknowledge what and when it's doing something.
Somewhere there's a YouTube video out there probably of the first autopilot drive. It was
Whiplash
probably
all over.
Awful. But the truth is that human error has really caused, roughly 94% of accidents on the roads, and that artificial intelligence can save lives over time as these machines get better at reacting, and they can react quicker because they're not flawed like a human mind. A human mind is very powerful, but nowadays some of these computers can make quicker decisions than the human can, and that in the long run will save lives. We're not really there yet. It does seem like society really has a perfection requirement for this to really fully approve of this technology, where, in my opinion, just being safer than a human would probably I would rather that be the threshold. Now, that kind of plays to the title, it's going to save a lot of lives, but there are people that are going to be impacted and already have been first, and I think that's a tough reality of this kind of technology, and I think it's the same with a lot of these technologies over time. So that's Tesla Autopilot. Another couple interesting points is that, renting out your Tesla, that's something that Elon Musk has talked about, where if you have a Tesla with full autopilot, you should be able to rent it out when you're not driving it to really ride share and let other people pay you to use your car when you're not using it. So Musk says that you can't afford not to, and he's actually said that owning a car other than a Tesla would be like owning a horse in a few years. It just wouldn't make financial sense.
It's going to be rough. I'm allergic to horses.
I know. So, Josh, you might have to have a Tesla Jeep. It's the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
You're going to get a Jeep truck.
That's the weirdest car I've ever seen.
So I guess when we talk about timelines, about autonomy and where that's all headed, Tesla is known, so they're kind of the big player here that's pushing this out first. So we're going to use them as kind of the bogey for the timeline. But Tesla, known for very aggressive, very optimistic timelines, they said that at the end of 2019, that this technology through autopilot should be available in late 2020 for full autonomy, even the ride-sharing capabilities and stuff like that.
Available, but legal is
Who knows
the
if
question.
it will be legal? Yeah, that's the crazy thing there. But I think that's a bit optimistic. There's a lot of years and billions more miles of data gathering, perfecting, and then the legislation and legal side of it before it really goes mainstream. Plus, if you check out our recent episode where we made 20 bold predictions for 2020, we do briefly discuss how we think the Cybertruck launch will be late, as Elon Musk sometimes has problems with his optimistic deadlines, like he snoozes those reminders on his iPhone. So that could very well happen again for autopilot going full autonomy.
All right, Austin. Let's take a short break and do a dad joke.
Uh-oh.
So this one, though, is a dad joke from a dad's dad. My dad sent me this joke actually today.
It's a granddad joke.
Yep. So at lunchtime, I got a text from my dad, and he sent me this joke just out of the blue. You ready?
I'm
All
ready.
Right. If you want to get a job in the lotion industry, I got one piece of advice for you, okay? Make sure you apply daily. That's the way you get a job. Make sure you apply daily.
That is true, and this time of year, that dry skin is real. Apply
it's dry.
daily.
Yep. So if you want to get a job in the industry, make sure you're applying daily.
So while not really being a part of our bold projections for 2020, Josh and I have some speculation. So we're not necessarily always speculators. We like things that we know. But sometimes it's good to dream. Sometimes it's good to have your ideas. So Josh and I each have some autonomous vehicle speculation that we think could happen. Mine is that Tesla should buy Uber and make an autonomous vehicle fleet. That solves a couple issues. First of all, that gives Tesla a huge test fleet to log billions and billions of miles and maybe, hopefully, offset some of their losses because they wouldn't be paying for drivers. And then Tesla could become more profitable, and that could be good news. Number two, Uber would win because their stock price really has not done well since it went public. And a lot of that is due to the issues that they're having, obviously with profitability, but also with the driver versus employee versus contractor, however their categories in which state or whatever that they're having. So if you don't have drivers, you don't have these issues. So there's my speculation. Tesla, buy Uber, save both companies some money, and develop that technology further rapidly.
And for me, it's around, I've had some conversation with some people, some in the auto industry and some friends and family who are real into this kind of autonomous vehicle. And we live here in the Midwest. There's a lot of distance between cities. And so my biggest hang up and issue really is the battery. And so, there's a certain amount of miles you can drive before you need to charge your battery. And I know they got the fast charge places now where it's supposed to be quicker to fully charge it up, but it still takes time. So I think one of the big steps forward will be the ability to solve that battery issue. And so whether that's some sort of replaceable battery where you have a gas station, but instead of fueling it with gas, you remove your battery and replace it with a charged one. And you kind of either, whether it's subscription based or pay per go or however it works, the idea that the battery, I think, especially for small towns that are distanced apart here, especially in the Midwest area, that would be the biggest factors. If I'm going to go from here in Ohio down to Texas, how long is that going to take me using a current autonomous vehicle? Because, when we talk autonomous vehicles, they're electric as well. And I should point that out, I guess.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way they're going, is the technology is pushing both the autonomous and electric vehicle in the same direction merged together, is if I wanted to drive me somewhere, but I'm going to have to stop and charge it up every 300 miles, that adjusts the trip. And so if they have the ability to, not only change out the batteries, but the autonomous vehicle knows, okay, here's the route I have to take so that when my battery's low, I'm next to a charge spot or a change spot, that I think that all needs integrated together.
And it would have to be then some uniform size batteries between car companies and stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunity for standardization there.
Yep.
Where you can just pull in your electric autonomous Chrysler minivan and get the same battery or the same size battery that a Tesla Model X or whatever would take.
Right. And, for the autonomous vehicle to know that. So if I put in, hey, Texas, it doesn't just take off and hope that there's somewhere close by when it's at 5%, out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas or something. It's like, well, wait a minute. Let's make sure that the routes are programmed in to know the distance and all those factors. And then what if you hit traffic? Does it adjust the route to know, okay, we're going to have to make a stop sooner? That autonomy needs to play into those factors as well.
So I think another technology that goes well and impacts autonomy is the technology of 5G. And we're going to have a full episode dedicated to 5G technology in the future. But overall, if you look at your cell phone, chances are you'll look down and you'll see LTE or 4G or whatever through whatever provider you've got. And that is really the fourth generation of cellular technology and speed. And I personally feel like it's pretty quick. I don't really have any qualms. I can watch YouTube videos with data and not have to buffer already, and things are really great. But 5G takes that one step further, and it actually can boost speeds by up to 100 times. So what this is going to allow vehicles to do is kind of be a part of the Internet of Things, which I think will probably be a part of that episode as well, where really a lot of items, a lot of vehicles and thermostats and buildings and wearables and cell phones and all this stuff is all interconnected on the internet, talking to each other in real time and making communication really, really quick. And that speed is really what helps these vehicles communicate with one another. So if you've got two vehicles going down the highway and they're both autonomous and they are connected and see each other and stuff like that, they can interact with one another and not run into each other and things like that.
Not just cars, but roads as well. If you have smart roads, with the idea of the technology built into the road to help direct and steer within, because one thing that can be confusing now with autonomous vehicles is construction. So you have a road, but now it's under construction. So now you're supposed to merge one direction or another, or there's cones put up. Right now, the autonomous vehicle, what does it do? But if the roads are smart and they can communicate and talk to you, they push you the right direction.
I think a sidebar is that someday in the future, when this is more caught on, is that users who do not embrace this technology are probably going to be penalized on a cost basis from their insurance companies and stuff like that. Once autonomous vehicles and this technology becomes widespread, very popular, proven very safe, those who choose not to embrace it are going to have to pay higher insurance premiums because their human driving is going to be more risky than the driving that a computer could do. And I think that that's something that is a real risk to people who are not going to be wanting to change and to embrace this technology in the future. So yeah, I think that's something that's coming up and going to be very interesting. So I guess I did want to talk about some investments in autonomy and how you can ride this growth category.
Ride it.
Yeah, I wrote that and did not even... Man,
You're
I'm
so
good.
funny by yourself.
I'm good.
We're not even trying.
So yes, how can I be a participant of the trend of embracing autonomous technology?
In this.
How can I ride along? So things that I always want to point out is that you should always discuss how these investments fit your overall portfolio picture with your advisor. Some investments, however, that could offer significant exposure to autonomy could be automakers. So companies like Tesla, we already talked about. General Motors, we already talked about. Ford also obviously has their own autonomy projects and stuff going on, electric vehicle projects going on. Those are just the United States companies around that specifically. Also tech companies, Google is one specifically with their Waymo division. You've got chip companies, Intel, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, AMD, Skyworks Solutions. These kind of technology companies are ways that are definitely going to be used in these vehicles as they need a lot of processing power for sure. 5G companies, when you're talking about how the internet, the connectivity and the Internet of Things is going to impact this, companies like Verizon, AT&T for sure are going to have an impact here. Ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft, they're going to have implications with this autonomy as well.
Yep. When we talk about any new technology that's coming out, you're going to see a lot of volatility in here as well.
Yeah.
So that's why we're we're mentioning a lot of companies here, and again, talk with your advisor about what works with you. These aren't necessarily any recommendations from us in any way, but the idea is when you're entering into anything new, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of risks you take for success or failure as you try new products. But now we're not talking not only about a new technology, but a new technology that could potentially hurt or kill people. So you're adding in another factor that the government at some point may step in as well. So, this is looking forward, especially when it comes to investing, is you got to be cautious and understand what you're getting into before you invest.
Right.
Because there's a lot of factors at play, including human lives, and which could have a big impact on regulation.
Absolutely. And also, we'll probably discuss this more as this podcast grows, but investing in single securities can be a lot more volatile than investing in a fund or a separately managed account portfolio or something with some diversification, but an opportunity to kind of diversify a little bit but still be focused on this trend. Now, and this is not in any way sponsored by any of these investments, but there are some ETFs that kind of track this autonomous vehicle movement, and we'll have a future episode talking about ETFs in general and what they are and how to use them in your portfolio. But there's one with the ticker DRIV, which is the Global X Autonomous and Electric Vehicles ETF. And there's one called the Crane Shares Electric Vehicles and Future Mobility ETF, which is KARS. Innovation Shares Next Gen Vehicle and Technology ETF, EKAR.
So wait, slow down. One of the cool things about ETFs is with stocks, there's a lot of companies out there. So a lot of the cool tickers are taken. Mutual funds, you need the X on the end. Pretty much all the mutual funds, they're long. They're kind of a hodgepodge of letters. ETFs, which are newer, there's a lot of cool little abbreviations you can get with your tickers, right? So we got Drive, DRIV. You got CARS, KRS. Then you got ECARS, EKAR. So, it's fun. And every time I see those tickers, it just cracks
Makes
me
you
up.
want to invest in it just because it's
just
got a
the idea
creative
that,
ticker.
They probably have somebody on staff that's the whole job is just come up with a cool ticker for their ETF trade.
I know, and I bet there's like bidding wars for tickers.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Because
it's like the internet, back when
Yeah,
people were
domain
grabbing
names.
up domain names. Yeah.
Man, domain flipping, ticker flipping, that's where
It
it's
is.
at. You buy it for nothing, you sell it for billions. So, Josh, what is really the biggest hang up when it comes to autonomy and that technology?
Yeah. So there was a survey by Car ID, or do you call it Carid? Carid?
I don't know. I'm going to go Car ID.
Car ID. I think
But
that's
we'll
probably
link it
better.
below just anyway.
Yeah, there's a link. But they were surveying and asking, would you drive a new autonomous car? And so the survey, first they asked people to identify what an autonomous vehicle was, which the answer being controlled by technology, entirely by technology. 48% were able to correctly guess that's what an autonomous vehicle meant. 52% thought that there was some sort of human control.
So more than half really don't really understand
Right.
fully what
Yeah,
autonomous
so
vehicles
there's still
are
some
anyway.
education that needs to happen, I
Right.
think. So keep that in mind as you look at some of these answers, that half the people didn't fully understand a fully autonomous vehicle.
James Bond would say that's shocking, positively shocking.
So in this survey, 75% of respondents said, given the choice, they would rather drive than ride in an autonomous vehicle. 75%. Seems high to me considering, have you ever been on a trip with little kids?
Oh, yeah.
If I could stop driving and pay attention to their screaming and help them with
Dad, play with me.
Yeah, or just, hey, hand them that juice box and that snack to get them the rest of the way. That would help with the trip.
Yeah,
for
don't do that
everybody.
while you're driving. That's just not smart.
64% said they would choose autonomous vehicles and they would rather own than rent or hire one. So even going back to that, what Musk was saying, that he thinks that it'll be more of a rideshare idea, that still, 2/3 of the people would rather own it, still want to own a vehicle. That mindset of owning is still there. If you look at if the question was asked, okay, if you're in a fully autonomous world, okay, we have self-driving cars, would you miss driving? 71% said they would miss driving. I think I'd fall in that boat, yeah.
I think so, but I also feel like that number's probably high, and it's only going to go down over time because millennials and younger, less and less people are driving all the time, and people are moving to bigger cities where driving is less of a big deal. So I feel like that number is going to trickle down over time. It seems a little high to me, but it kind of makes sense for where we are today if the majority of your drivers are older anyway.
Yeah. It's even, I was talking with even my little kids, they were saying that at school, their teachers talking about they may not even have to get a driver's license, depending on this advancement of technology. That you have some of these little kids in 15 years, there may be these vehicles where it's maybe not the same driver's license thing that we're used to because there's less driving involved.
Just hold on to your Jeep so you can show them what it's like to ride in a horse and buggy.
Yeah. Dad, what is that? What is that stick you keep shifting on?
There's a steering wheel. What do you turn that for?
So as we look through some of these other questions they had, one of the other ones was 55% of that survey said that they think having autonomous vehicles would greatly reduce but not eliminate accidents, while 24% said they think it would stay the same, and then the rest were kind of in between. But greatly reduce, half the people think that will help. And so I think that'll be a big piece of moving it forward because, like I said, the government at some point is going to have to make some decisions on what they allow, what they don't, who's responsible for accidents, all that stuff. And if the general population in the United States is leaning towards wanting this and thinking it will help in the long run, that may help push the legislation one way or another.
I think another key point is to think of where America is going to fall in the global picture of autonomy. Are we going to lead it, or are we going to lag and adopt it after China or somewhere in Europe adopts it? And I think based on the fact that we have the largest tech companies, some of the largest car companies in the world, that will probably lead it, but it's going to take the adoption, the public trust and adoption thoughts first.
All right. So last piece of that survey, when asked how they would feel about riding in an autonomous vehicle, 8% said they would feel very safe, 38% said somewhat safe, 29% said somewhat unsafe, and then 24% said very unsafe.
That's the ticker.
If we say right now, Austin, if I had a vehicle out there and I said it was fully autonomous right now, because I think that was their question they asked, like driving now, how would you feel?
Right now, I would say somewhat unsafe.
I think I'm in the same boat.
I mean, I think that there would probably be fail-safes in place that would keep it from being very unsafe.
Yeah.
But I think that especially in the day-to-day driving that I do, not quite there yet.
No. But yeah, if I was going to jump on the highway and what's available now in the Tesla or anything along that route, I would say if I'm on the highway, I would probably have my hands somewhere right around the steering wheel.
Right.
And I don't know if I would get any benefit of any sort of relaxation from that.
It's more of a stressor.
But I would say I would be somewhat unsafe because had I see a car approaching me, I would get a little more antsy, have my foot hovering over the brake.
Right.
But I think I would, somewhat.
I think the key statistic there is that well over half of respondents to that survey, and take that with a grain of salt, it was probably, I don't know how big the survey was.
Yeah, about a couple thousand, just around 1,000. Yeah.
But over 50% said somewhat unsafe or very unsafe. So more than half the population, you could extrapolate that to say not quite trusting autonomous safety.
Yep.
So right. Josh, what is next? Like, what are some of the next things that could be impacted by autonomous vehicles, autonomous driving, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think obviously the end goal is anything that requires some sort of driving will become autonomous. So the big one would be airplanes. So if you think about that one, I think that will also be the hardest one. If you look at what happened with Boeing, they're starting to, and not just them, but in general, that industry is moving to having more computer-driven results, less manual from the pilot. And so that was part of what Boeing ran into, is their anti-stall technology there was reacting to indicators that were causing it to do things it shouldn't do. And that was, it could be manually overridden, but when you're talking about a large plane with a lot of different pieces, that was what was causing those plane crashes. Because even the pilot trying to correct it, it would then revert back, and it was causing issues.
And a lot of that's going to continue to be training, just like they're working on the fixes, having to training everyone when things go, because I'm sure there's going to have to be some sort of override process where people have to be trained, and who knows what that will look like. But getting the public to trust airplanes in general.
So you want to take my survey on that? How safe would I feel getting into an airplane? Yeah, that would be very unsafe right now. But yeah, that's the biggest thing, is that coming up with that people's mindset, because, another one would be trains. So if you think about trains, I think that would be one that would be a lot easier to automate.
Easy.
You're stuck on a track. It's not like you have to make turns anywhere.
On or off.
Yeah, but you still see, Amtrak's had some accidents the last couple of years,
yeah.
and there are pieces that are automating, but they're adjusting the speeds and stuff. And you think of subways and the larger cities where, they're making these periodic stops. We were at the airport, and they have those little tram systems, and I don't see anybody in those. Those are pretty automated, where I think the technology is there where when you're stuck on a track, it makes it a little easier because there's less decisions. There's no one crossing in front of you from a train standpoint. Trains don't,
right.
merge lanes like that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some room there for that automation. And the big one for cost saving would be trucking. A couple of years ago, I was at a local university, Bowling Green State University, and they hosted a thing, and they were talking about autonomous truck driving and the idea that you could save a lot of money and time for companies when they're shipping things through trucks. And, some of the early technology would just be linking multiple trucks together, letting the lead truck have a driver, but the ones behind it react instantaneously to that truck driving's movement.
Right.
So he brakes, everybody brakes. He swerves left, everybody swerves left. And then the idea is you just take turns, so you extend the drive time. Well, that's an easier technology to get to because you still have drivers. They're just each taking turns driving.
I think that that trucks, because we're already in the United States anyway, have a really shortage of truck drivers. Truck drivers are very lucrative. And we're like importing truck drivers from all around the world to drive trucks because we need to get all the stuff as a very consumer-driven nation. All the stuff we order, all the stuff we buy needs delivered, and trucks the most effective way to do that right now. I think that this will alleviate a bit of that, and hopefully will bring down logistics costs and hopefully costs to consumers. But I kind of have the thought that will probably just lead to bigger profits for logistics companies.
Probably.
But both could be okay.
Yeah. And then you talk about, just getting spots from point A to point B, from a trucking standpoint. There's still got to be delivery. Somebody's got to deliver and unload and load, but getting them from one spot to another, that's where you can save a lot. Ride sharing, you talked about, Uber and Lyft, the idea that, especially large cities where owning a vehicle may not be cost effective, that, okay, instead of waiting for a taxi or ordering an Uber, I order a vehicle to show up without anybody in it, and I get in the back and it drives me somewhere where I need to go, and then it goes find somewhere else to hang out. And so the idea of, you don't need a taxi driver at that point, then you have a vehicle with a built-in navigation system.
Right.
And then the last one is just that idea, if you think through who would be able to utilize this, would be the elderly, because as people age, one of the things that happens is the safety in their driving for them and for others can be affected. And so there's kind of some laws being in place about how often you need to go get a new license based on your age to make sure you're still safe to drive. Well, if the car is driving, the passenger's age is irrelevant. So it allows more mobility for longer for elderly people.
Yeah, and they can be independent as long as possible and stretch that out and not really need help from other people. So yeah, I think that could really help out. So I guess in conclusion, I'd expect to see some future upcoming James Bond movie to incorporate some full autonomous technology. But I would probably anticipate that it'll be in a movie before we see it, especially on the streets of Findlay, Ohio, because that movie technology is pretty far ahead of reality typically. But hey, it could be coming very, very soon, and that's something that we are anticipating, and we're excited about that technology and where that's headed.
All right. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you check out our website. We got a free gift for you there. It's 8 Principles of Timeless Investing. It's free. You get to download it. Just give us your email, and we'll send it to you. They have 8 overarching investment themes. They're meant to keep you on track to help you meet your long-term goals. It's on our website at theinvesteddads.com.
And finally, to help us to continue to grow this podcast and help a lot of people, we need you and we need your help. So we're giving away some swag. So we're giving away T-shirts, official Invested Dad T-shirts, to help create some buzz through Apple Podcasts. So what you need to do to get your free T-shirt is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, screenshot that review, and then email the screenshot to hello@theinvesteddads.com, and we will follow up with the first 25 subscribers who send that screenshot to the email address that we just talked about, and we'll get your shirt size and mailing address and get that shirt to you. The shirts are awesome, so shout out to Flag City Clothing in Findlay, Ohio for really hooking us up with some awesome shirts. And I do want to note that this giveaway is only for North American subscribers, so U.S., Canada, and Mexico. due to logistics costs and customs and stuff like that. It's just the most simple way to do that, as well as the fact that it's really hard for us to see some reviews if left abroad. But if you do leave us a review and you're not in those areas, we love you and we're thankful for you. So thank you for doing that anyway. As always, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
If you liked what you heard, subscribe so you can get future episodes as they come out. We'll be launching episodes every single week on Thursdays.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.